The flickering candlelight did little to push back the oppressive darkness of the old manor's library. Its flame danced, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to twist into unnatural shapes on the wood-paneled walls. For Jonathan Whitlock, a man of logic and letters, the atmosphere was a palpable weight upon his soul. It was the summer of 1970, barely a year since the unthinkable violence at a Los Angeles residence called the Tate House, a name that had become a global byword for savagery. Yet here, in the quiet English countryside of Cumbria, hundreds of miles and a world away from that chaos, the terror had found him. It began subtly, a fleeting impression of a gaunt, spectral face at the window, the faint, discordant echo of chanting in the dead of night. But tonight, the vision was different. Tonight, it was chillingly clear. He saw a woman, her face a mask of porcelain anguish, standing at the foot of his bed, her form shimmering like heat haze before. She dissolved into the air, leaving behind only the scent of old roses and a profound, bone-deep cold. Jonathan sat bolt upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was not a superstitious man. He was a historian, an archivist hired to catalog the vast and dusty collection of the Porthaven family. But reason was beginning to crumble. These were not mere nightmares. They felt like echoes, ripples from some distant, violent event. He had dismissed the first occurrences as stress, or perhaps a reaction to the grim news reports from America. But the connection felt deeper, more intrinsic. He had to understand. The following morning, sleep-deprived and gripped by a newfound determination, Jonathan descended into the belly of the manor, the archive room. It was a cavernous space, smelling of decaying leather and forgotten years. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the high, grimy windows. His task, to organize centuries of family correspondence, now felt like a personal quest. He was no longer just cataloging history. He was searching for an explanation for his own unraveling sanity. His research began with the house itself. Porthaven Manor was built in 1588, a reward to a naval commander, Sir Alistair Porthaven, for his minor role in skirmishes against the Spanish Armada. The land, however, had a much older pedigree. Local folklore, which Jonathan had previously scoffed at, spoke of a druidic grove that once stood upon the hill, a place of ancient power and ritual. He found a crumbling ledger from 1602 that detailed the exorbitant cost of importing a specific type of black basalt rock from a quarry in Wales, used to line the foundation of the manor's grand fireplace. The notation was peculiar. For the securing of the hearth and the silencing of the old whispers, Jonathan made a note. The whispers. Days turned into a week, the visions persisting with a relentless rhythm. The gaunt-faced man appeared again, this time in the reflection of a rain-streaked window pane. Jonathan noticed he wore what looked like a 17th-century Puritan's collar. The woman with the porcelain face seemed to be weeping, her silent sobs a vibration in the very air. Desperation led Jonathan to cross-reference the dates of his more intense experiences with the family records. A pattern, faint but undeniable, began to emerge. The spectral activity seemed to spike not on random nights but on the anniversaries of tragic events within the Porthaven line. He found a record of a drowning in the lake on October 3, 1741. On the previous October 3rd, he had awoken gasping, his lungs burning with the phantom sensation of water. The connection was undeniable, but it felt local, contained to the manor's own tragic history. What, then, was the link to the Tate murders, an event so modern, so geographically distant? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, tucked behind a false panel in Sir Alistair's old writing desk. The letters were not from a Porthaven, but were addressed to one. They were written by a man named Silas Theobald, dated between 1589 and 1592. Silas was a scholar, a man obsessed with what he called sympathetic resonance of spirit. His theory, laid out in a frantic, spidery script, was revolutionary and terrifying. He postulated that acts of extreme, ritualistic violence did not simply end with the death of the victims. Instead, they created a fissure in the fabric of the world, a spiritual wound. And just as a tuning fork can cause another of the same frequency to vibrate across a room, these wounds could resonate with places that shared a similar spiritual frequency, locations steeped in their own. History of bloodshed and dark ritual? Jonathan's hands trembled as he read Silas's final letter, its ink blurred by what looked like tears. I fear my inquiries have drawn attention, Silas wrote. There is a man who watches me, a fanatic of the new Puritan sect. He calls my work diabolical concordance and believes I traffic with demons. He does not understand the science of it. The old grove upon your land, Alistair, the one you built upon, it is a locus, a receiver. The stones there, they hum with a memory of blood sacrifice from ages past. I have felt it. Of violence enacted elsewhere, of a similar fervor and ritual, will find its echo here. You must secure the foundation, as we discussed. You must silence the whispers lest they become screams. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in Jonathan's mind with the force of a physical blow, the Tate murders. The police reports, which he had read with morbid fascination, described a scene of almost ritualistic horror. The word pig written in blood on the front door. The sheer, chaotic brutality. It was an act of extreme violence that had shocked the world. According to Silas Theobald's forgotten theory, such an event would send out shockwaves, and a place like Porthaven Manor, built on an ancient druidic sacrificial site, would be a perfect receiver for that dark energy. His visions weren't just random hauntings. They were echoes. The Tate murders had, in effect, tuned the spiritual frequency of the manor, amplifying its own inherent tragedies, making the past visible, audible, and terrifyingly tangible. He wasn't just seeing Porthaven ghosts. He was witnessing the aftershocks of a modern nightmare reverberating through an ancient locus of pain. The atmosphere in the manor shifted from one of eerie unease to one of palpable dread. Jonathan's discovery did not quell the phenomena. It amplified them, as if by understanding their source he had somehow given them more power. The whispers in the night became distinct voices arguing in archaic English. The scent of roses would be overpowering one moment, replaced the next by the metallic tang of blood. He knew he had to find the silencing that Sir Alistair had undertaken. He spent hours in the great hall, examining the massive fireplace made of the imported black basalt. The stones were cold to the touch, even on a warm day, and they seemed to absorb the light, creating a pool of absolute shadow within the hearth. Running his fingers over the rough, dark stone, Jonathan felt a faint, almost imperceptible vibration, a deep hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. He recalled Silas's warning. The stones there, they hum with a memory of blood sacrifice. This was the receiver. This was the conduit through which the echoes of the Tate murders were being channeled, energizing the residual memories of every tragedy that had ever stained the manor's history. He needed to find out what Silas and Alistair had done to secure the hearth. His search became frantic. A race against his own deteriorating nerves. The visions were becoming more aggressive. The Puritan man no longer just watched. He pointed a bony, accusatory finger. The weeping woman's face began to show streaks of crimson like bloody tears. Finally, buried in a trunk of architectural plans, he found it. A single, brittle vellum sheet titled Hearthwork. Per the instructions of St., it was a diagram of the fireplace, showing not just the basalt foundation, but a hidden chamber beneath the hearthstone, accessible only by removing a specific keystone at the back. The notation was clear. This chamber was to be a receptacle for a counter-harmony, an object of profound peace or blessed nature that would cancel out the dark resonance of the stones. It was a spiritual dampener. Jonathan felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. The silencing had not been a metaphor. It was a physical act. But the diagram offered no clue as to what the counter-harmony object was or if it was still in place. Had it decayed? Had it been removed by some unknowing descendant? The violent energy of the Tate murders, resonating with the ancient power of the druidic stones, must have overwhelmed whatever protection had been placed there. That night, armed with a crowbar and a powerful flashlight, Jonathan returned to the great hall. The room was freezing, a cold that had nothing to do with the season. The shadows clung to the corners like living things. He could hear the whispers, a chaotic chorus of fear and anger. He found the keystone, a slightly darker piece of basalt carved with a faint, interlacing Celtic knot. It took all his strength to pry it loose. The stone came free with a grating screech, revealing a dark, narrow space behind it. He shone his light inside. The chamber was small, no larger than a bread box. And it was empty, except for a single, small object lying in the dust at the bottom. It was not a cross or a relic as he had expected. It was a child's wooden toy, a small hand-carved horse. One of its legs was broken off. It was a simple, pathetic thing, but as Jonathan reached in and picked it up, a profound shift occurred in the room. The whispering stopped, abruptly. The crushing cold began to recede, replaced by the normal chill of an old stone house. The oppressive weight lifted from his chest. He stood there in the silence, the little wooden horse in his hand, and understood. The contraharmony wasn't a holy relic. It was an object of pure, innocent love. It was the favorite toy of a Port Haven child, placed there by a grieving parent after some long-forgotten tragedy, an act of love intended to silence the whispers of pain. For centuries it had worked. But the sheer, unprecedented violence of the Tate Murders, event of such global magnitude and symbolic terror, had been too much. Its resonant frequency had been too powerful, too dissonant, shattering the protective peace of the little toy, just as its leg was shattered. The echo had broken the silence. Jonathan did not destroy the black basalt stones. He could not. They were part of the house's foundation, both physical and spiritual. Instead, he carefully cleaned the little wooden horse, had the broken leg meticulously repaired by a craftsman, and placed it back in its hidden chamber along with a new object of his own, a locket containing a photograph of his own daughter, smiling. He resealed the keystone. The manor was not suddenly devoid of its history. He could still sometimes feel a presence, see a shadow move from the corner of his eye. But the aggressive visions, the chilling whispers, the overwhelming sense of dread, they were gone. The silence had been restored, not by erasing the past, but by reinforcing the counterweight of simple, human goodness. The story of Port Haven Manor reveals a terrifying possibility. First theorized by a forgotten Elizabethan scholar, that violence can echo across time and space, and that places like people can be traumatized by events they never directly witnessed. The Tate murders were not just a crime scene in Los Angeles. For a brief, terrifying period, their shockwaves manifested in an English manor, a chilling testament to the idea that no act of evil is ever truly contained.